Hey guys, welcome back to Entrepreneurs Galore. I'm your host and creator, Yusha, and today I actually have an exciting guest. His name is Micah. So, Micah, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Micah, as you said. I appreciate you having me on, by the way. It's always fun to be able to do podcasts and talk with people and share some of my experiences that have been important to me and hopefully helpful to other people. So, as far as like an intro to myself, so I'm an entrepreneur in something called Ozone therapy. I don't usually refer to myself as an entrepreneur, but I'm a business owner. So, I have a business with about 30 employees. We make a few $1 million a year. We're actually we'll be able to about 5 million this year, so we're doing pretty well. It's still a pretty small business, but the goal is to keep on growing in that. And so, what ozone therapy is we work in the medical equipment space primarily for private and integrative clinics. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't know how deep you want me to go into the backstory, or do you want me just to go for it?
Oh yeah, no, go for it, man. Go,
Okay.
go. Tell me all the details, man.
Yeah, so I mean, I got into this not because I was like trying to make money or anything, but my brother had brain cancer, so I was actually just
No,
looking for
man.
stuff that would be helpful for him, because he was going through, the system, the school of thought, and that system was cut, burn, or poison. So those are kind of your three options in terms of dealing with cancer. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like there's a lot of needed things within that, but it really diminished his quality of life. And at a certain point, they said like, "Hey, we don't really have any more options for you. We don't really know what to do with you." So they offered up, well, we can try some experimental stuff and see how that goes. And so experimental stuff, there was in one instance was this drug that was extremely toxic, greatly diminished quality of life, and it only worked for 13% of people. The upside of it, everybody got the
Mm-hmm.
downside, but only
Okay.
13% of people would get a potential upside of reducing the tumor. And you had to have a certain genotype. So your genetics had to be a certain way for it to work in that capacity to potentially work.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't even bother testing him for the genotype because, he's a stat line. They want to see what happens and how his body responds to it. So as a brother and seeing somebody that you love suffer pretty greatly at what you thought was a great medical institution, because I wanted to become a doctor and I was, in nursing school and that kind of stuff, started to look into things that could potentially help them. So there were some things out there that we did find, like hyperbaric oxygen therapy, extremely helpful for him in reducing the negative side effects of chemo and radiation, improving energy, improving sleep, pretty much all quality of life markers. And then that kind of started just this trajectory of trying to look for stuff that would continue to do that. And at the time, wasn't even looking for stuff that would necessarily work with the cancer as much as just improve his quality of life. And yeah, I found ozone therapy. It's a really long story. I'm not going to get into all of it, but
Mm-hmm.
basically, I came across ozone therapy and found it really fascinating because there was a lot of studies on it. There was over at the time 1,800 medical studies, and I'm not saying that they were all super credible. Some are double-blind clinical trials, and then some were a little bit more just like a doctor making an observation on a handful of patients, but it did have some pretty good scientific resource behind it, and it was helping a lot of people in different areas. That's what really drew me to it. Is like people were using it for diabetic ulcers, and then at the same time they'd use it for like chemotherapy patients. So it's kind of intriguing in the sense that like this one modality could be used across the spectrum of a lot of different things.
Right.
And so I was kind of hooked by that concept, also being able to help my brother Matt with it, and started to produce basically articles and information on it, because there was all these studies out there, but there was nowhere that you could go to and read on it. So you couldn't
Correct.
like just go to a website and say, "Hey, what's going on with ozone therapy?" And now there's still needs to be more, but
Mm-hmm.
even today there's like 50-fold, 100-fold the amount of information just available online that's not just baked into a study. So what I did at that time was I started to put together articles that said like, "Hey, here's the state of the art. So like what the research says on ozone therapy and cancer and how it fits into the context of that." And so you'd
And
read like 100 to 200 studies on a certain topic and then make an
uh-huh.
article from that and just cite everything. So
And were you still in nursing school at that time?
yeah, it was a pretty busy time of life. So I was in nursing school. I had started this business. Um, I was, engaged, and yeah, it was a pretty busy time. But I was in nursing school and working at the pharmacy too, and then kind of I wasn't really fully into like doing this business, and it wasn't even a business at that point. It was still just like doing
Hmm.
writing and education and that kind of stuff. But yeah, and then that essentially gradually converted into creating a business that would hopefully help people in that capacity. So started providing equipment and all that kind of stuff, and then yeah, today we're here and still growing, and hopefully going to do more and more of the same in terms of like helping people out, and not necessarily just with ozone therapy, but whatever company comes along in that regard.
So, talk to me about like how exactly does ozone therapy help with people with like diabetic ulcers or obviously like for example cancers? It improves the quality of life in which way exactly?
Well, in the context of like diabetic ulcers, so that's like you have a non-healing wound essentially. So there's a wound there that isn't healing up, and the body's not taking care of. It's not using its normal responses to heal that area. And so in that it interacts differently based on the tissue that it's applied to. So if we're applying it into the skin, it's going to be different than if there's an intravenous therapy. So that's where they take some blood out and they mix it with the gas and then they put it back in. They have different reactions and different mechanisms. But in
Okay.
the case of a diabetic ulcer, they can put a bag around the area and infuse this gas into the bag. And that's essentially going to do a couple things. It's going to stimulate healing by stimulating growth factor and circulation to the area and that kind of thing. And then the second thing is if there's any sort of like pathogen or infection that's slowing the healing or preventing it from really healing up, it'll also eliminate that infection. In the case of like cancer, it's not like it's attacking the cancer. So I don't want to give like anybody false hope in that regard.
Right.
But it greatly helps with quality of life. So they do an IV of ozone therapy. And if somebody is undergoing chemo or even just has cancer and they're not doing chemo, but in the case specifically of chemo, there's studies where they're showing around a 70% improvement in quality of life metrics, including like sleep and brain fog and pain, nausea, hair loss, like all that kind of stuff. So it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of cool. And that's a really simple treatment that's not going to negate the effect that you want from the chemotherapy,
Mm-hmm.
but it's going to greatly improve the overall quality of life in that regard.
Nice. And for example, like if somebody is either at stage one cancer or stage four cancer, like would we still see a quality of life improvement, or is it like based off of how far the cancer along is?
Well, that's usually in the context of chemotherapy. So the
Mm,
diminishment of quality of life in that context is coming from the chemotherapy. There's
understood.
other, things that it's doing than just that, though. I mean, it would be helping with essentially what it's doing is it's helping to build a better terrain for the body to be able to heal and do what it needs to do. So it does that through there's four different mechanisms primarily. There's
Mm-hmm.
oxygen efficiency, which is your ability to take and utilize oxygen at the cell level. So that's essentially creating energy. And our bodies range on how effective they are at doing that. So lifestyle factors would have an effect. Your age has an effect on that. People that are older are less oxygen efficient than people that are younger. And so if you can slow down the process at which you're losing oxygen efficiency or bump it up a bit, that's going to help a lot of other parameters because the body needs to be able to, it has to be able to create energy effectively to be able to do any sort of healing, to be able to do any sort of function that it needs to do. So that's like a really important baseline to have is just that we're taking and utilizing oxygen pretty well. The second mechanism would be that it's helping with immune modulation, which is balancing out the immune system. So the immune system, you don't necessarily just want to boost it up, right? Because that would be like an
Mm-hmm.
autoimmune disorder. That's when the immune
Right.
system is starting to attack the body because it can't identify what's good, what's bad, all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't want an immune system that's not killing off pathogens and bad bugs. So what you really want is a balanced immune system. And ozone therapy helps by balancing it out and not necessarily boosting it or pushing it down. It's just bringing it into what's called homeostasis. So in the case of
Gotcha.
somebody having an autoimmune disorder, it would quiet it down. In the case of somebody not having a fully functioning immune system, it would help to bring it up. So it's kind of cool in that way because like
Yeah.
there's it almost seems intelligent, and that's kind of where like at first I was like this is bullshit. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like what's happening is that we're actually causing a small stress to the body. So exercise is doing the same thing, right? Like it's actually stressful to your body to exercise. If you
Mm-hmm.
were to look at it from a biochemical standpoint and just like say and just do an assessment on like right when you finished exercising, you'd say this person's like really stressed out biochemically. But
Hmm.
what happens is your body responds to that stress by building back stronger. You get better muscles, you get better cardiovascular function, like pretty much everything gets better in your body. And there's other things like that, right? There's saunas, there's ice baths, there's different things that we can use that are actually stressors to our body that end up improving it. And ozone therapy is pretty similar in that. So ozone is not intelligent. It doesn't know how do I make balance out the immune system? How do I make these things come into homeostasis, into balance? That's your body that knows to do that. And so ozone therapy is just a catalyst that gets your body to make the appropriate adjustments that it needs to do. So
Right.
yes,
It's not the ozone that's smart. It's the body that's smart in
yep.
reacting to whatever you actually give it.
Yeah. So we're essentially, yeah, causing, and it's not like a replacement for exercise. I'm not saying that. I'm
Correct.
just
Yeah.
making the comparison that it's a similar concept to exercise where we're producing a small stress to create a beneficial response.
Right.
So that was mechanism number two, the immune modulation. I know I'm kind of rambling, but
No, go for
mechanism,
it. This
I'll go
Yeah,
quickly.
no, this is all fascinating to me. So I love to hear about the medical science behind things because I am not a medical expert. I'm into like computers and stuff. So this is all very fascinating to me.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's good stuff. So yeah, the third thing is microcirculation. So that's actually improving like blood flow. And there's multiple parameters of that. There's like the viscosity of the blood. There's actually the ability of different cells within the blood to be able to bend and fold to fit through these like tiny capillaries. There's the like elasticity of the veins and the arteries themselves. Like how well do they move, or are they kind of rigid? So there's a lot of different parameters, but it's improving a lot of different parameters within the blood to get the blood to flow better. And that improves
Hmm.
microcirculation, which is better blood distribution to the brain, to the organs, pretty much everything that you need to function. And it sounds kind of like not very sexy. It's just blood flow, but it's actually extremely important and is a pretty big contributor in disease. So it's a big factor. So in the case of, there was a study done on, they had some stroke patients, they had some patients with like healthy brain function, and they gave them both ozone therapy to see what would happen within the brain. And the interesting thing was that, so a stroke patient usually has what's called a hypoxic part of the brain, like a part of the brain that's not getting appropriate blood and oxygen delivery. And so
Hmm.
what happened in the study is that the patients that had a part of the brain that was hypoxic actually got improved blood flow and improved oxygen delivery to that part of the brain, but the other parts of the brain stayed the same because they didn't need it. And then for the patients
Oh.
that had just normal brain function, they actually didn't really see much of a difference in what happened after they gave them ozone therapy. So again, like another example that it seems intelligent, it's truly your body that's being intelligent, but it's a really strong catalyst or stimulus for the body to be able to take and make those adjustments. And then the fourth thing is it mitigates what's called oxidative stress. Oxidative stress, for people that don't know, it's theorized to be the leading cause of the aging process and of developing disease. So it's a super, super fundamental system, a super, super fundamental thing to the body, in a not good way. We do need some oxidative stress, but you don't want too much. So it's the excess that's bad. And what oxidative stress is there's these things called free radicals in the body that are floating around, and what they message to different molecules on what needs to happen. So they're essentially messengers providing signals of, hey, you do this, that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But when we get oxidatively stressed, like you're smoking cigarettes all the time, you're making bad lifestyle choices, you're eating too much, you're really stressed out, that all produces more oxidative stress. And these molecules that are called free radicals, they build up, and there gets to be a lot of them. And the balancing part to the free radicals normally are the antioxidants. So that's why people associate antioxidants with the good thing, is because it's actually reducing oxidative stress. So antioxidants combat free radicals. So usually when the free radicals get to be too much, the antioxidants balance it out, and they end up going back into homeostasis. So we want a good balanced system there. The reason that it's bad for free radicals, there to be too many of them, is that they start to throw wrenches into the system. So they're not performing their function anymore. There's too many of them. So they just
Okay.
like don't have a job essentially. And so they actually start to break down cells. They start to break down mitochondria. They start to break down the body on a very small level, on the cell level. And
Right.
that ends up catapulting into diseases and a faster aging process. So ozone therapy actually helps to mitigate that whole thing by improving your production of antioxidants naturally. So your body now
Mm-hmm.
is more capable of fighting the excess of free radicals by producing more antioxidants. So those were the four things. No, that was kind of long.
Nice. No, I mean, it is long, but it's actually great because I'm like, this is actually very fascinating about ozone therapy itself because obviously the only thing that I've ever heard of the ozone layer is like, oh, the ozone layer in the atmosphere is breaking down, right? So I didn't know that uh, ozone therapy existed in the first place and how beneficial it can actually be. So you mentioned that obviously ozone therapy itself, it can be applied in very different ways, right? So what has been the most like effective way that you've seen, or is it just like a case by case scenario of like, okay, well, this person had ozone therapy can help this person in X way, so we should apply it in a different type of way.
So, like, what are the most effective uh, indications, or what are the reasons that people use it?
Yeah, like what is the most effective way of getting ozone and how
Oh,
often? I would say,
into the
yeah,
body. Okay.
yes,
Yeah. So, like application. Yeah. The most effective way would be IV. So, that would be done at a clinic, obviously. So, you have to go
okay,
into a clinic. They're going to pull out some blood. They're going to mix it with ozone gas, which is O3. And then they're
mm-hmm.
going to put that blood back into the body, and it's kind of a cool process. Your blood actually, comes out kind of dark and red, and it goes back in like bright red. So it's kind of a cool visual. But yeah, that would be the most effective way. There's a lot of different ways that it's applied. People do like ozone enemas. They'll do vaginal insufflation for like infertility issues and different things. So there's a lot of different ways that it can be applied. Those three are the best though, which is ozone enema, not very glamorous, vaginal insufflation, not very glamorous, and IVs are
Mm-hmm.
kind of cool. So everybody likes those.
Yeah,
But those are the three best ways to apply it to get like that full body systemic response from it. And then there's other ways that it can be applied. So if you have an ear infection, you can actually put some of the gas into the ears. If there's a stomach infection like Helicobacter pylori, you can drink
mm-hmm.
ozone water, and that will help to eliminate the infection. Or take like an ozonated oil pill, and that helps as well. Even with like giardiasis, there was a study that they had 76% of the patients were able to eliminate giardiasis with the ozonated oil pills. And then you
What's
can do,
giardiasis? But
yeah, it's
if
like
you
a
don't,
stomach infection, basically.
okay. Oh
Yeah.
wow. So ozone therapy has like we were talking about like life threatening, diseases and like autoimmune diseases and whatnot. And obviously, like now, even just for like a stomach infection, ozone therapy seems to be quite beneficial, even to like the smallest difference in health, or sorry, the smallest sickness, as I would
Uh,
put it.
yeah, I mean, I don't want to make it sound like every time you have a cold, you need to do it, or like
Right.
every time there's something that is going on that it's the thing to go to. It is. I mean, that's part of why I got into it, is because it's like you can have a system, and you can use it for so many different applications. That wouldn't include everything that you're ever going to come across, obviously, but it's a really good tool overall because it's so versatile. It can be used in so many different areas, and it's overall pretty easy to administer. I'm probably saying that from being somebody that's been involved in this for a while. So, take that
Right.
with a grain of salt. You'd have to
Yeah.
spend a couple hours to learn it, but it's not like you'd have to spend, months trying to figure it out. You'd have to dedicate, an afternoon or something to kind
Right.
of get your head around it, but relatively simple.
Yeah, but
But
I'm
yeah,
guessing like you would still need to be like certified if administering an IV, right?
oh
Or
yeah,
is that
yeah.
something? Okay.
I'm not saying go do an IV. So yeah,
Yeah.
you have to be a medical practitioner. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. And
Um, I do know people that do IVs on themselves, but I never tell anybody to do that.
okay.
Like, so
yeah.
our head nurse, actually, though, she managed an ICU for 20 some years and had 90 some nurses under her. But she's funny because she'll always be running IVs on herself. So like at this last conference we did, she's walking around with her own bag going at the same time. And yeah, it's
And
funny.
then she's administering other people with the same IV, with obviously a different bag, but the same thing. Yeah. Okay. So, um, I guess talk to me about the business side of things, right? So we obviously covered like the scientific side of ozone therapy itself. So I want to know more about your business and how exactly you grew it to be 30 employees, because obviously it might still be a small business in technical terms, but like being I guess the manager, like the CEO of 30 employees, seems to be a very daunting task. So how exactly do you handle that, and how did you grow it to be 30 employees in the first place?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've gotten to think about it a little bit less and less, especially this year, because I'm actually not the CEO anymore. I have
Okay.
100% equity of the business. I own it outright.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any loans. I don't have any debt. I don't have any of
Wow,
that. But
that's
um,
incredible.
yeah, I've always done a debt-free model, just because I didn't understand how to leverage debt very well. So I've
Mm-hmm.
done everything I've ever. The only time I took out a loan was when I bought my first house, and then I paid that
Mm,
off within a year. Um,
nice.
and then,
Within
but
1 year?
yeah, yeah,
Oh wow,
um,
that's incredible.
yeah. Well, my business did pretty well that year, and I decided to take some of the distributions and just put them into the house because it was the first time I had ever had a loan, and I didn't like the feeling of it, so I just decided to pay it off.
Right.
Actually, I'm sorry, it wasn't a year, so it was February 2018 to I think it was like January 2020, somewhere in there. So like a year and a half, or
Okay.
somewhere in that ballpark. Or no,
Right.
that's almost 2 years. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was the only loan. So now my position within the company is we call them visionary and integrator. Integrator is the person that is what would be a CEO to most people.
Mm-hmm.
So the integrator is primarily responsible for creating systems, hiring and firing people, and then taking the vision and turning that into the systems and
Mm-hmm.
managing it and all that kind of stuff. So on a simple level, they're creating systems, tracking it, measuring it, and then hiring people for those systems. Um, and then the visionary is more responsible for like overall. That's the seat I sit in now, which is like
Nice.
um, I meet with him once a week for an hour, and that's pretty much all I have to do in the business right now. I still do spokesperson stuff too, so I'm still on the org chart. I'm in this box called spokesperson. So I
Mm-hmm.
still go on podcasts, I go and speak at events, or I show up at events and that kind of stuff. And those are the roles that I fulfill. I'm actually the CEO for another company too right now called Therium, which is a metabolomics diagnostics company. So that's essentially measuring the metabolism. That's a startup. So that as my job is to make it not a startup, and
Right.
then hand it over to somebody else who can dial it up from there. But yeah, as far as like how we grew the business, that was kind of your question initially,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the first year, we came out with a product that just really there wasn't a whole lot of availability on the market. So like
Mm-hmm.
finding a niche, it's a lot more saturated now, but at that time it just wasn't. And so it was a lot easier. And I don't think I went into that knowing it. I was just interested in this thing. So it was right place, right time. It's not like I had any formal business training or anything like that. I was just kind of doing something that I was passionate about and interested in. And then started to learn business along the way because I was like, well, if I want to reach more people and help more people like my brother, then I need to get better at business. And so that was kind of the thought process. I started at the opposite end of the side, which was more just like, I want to do this thing. Um,
Right.
and so getting into it though, it was finding like the right product, which was at that time a therapeutic laboratory grade ozone generator that was small and inexpensive. And we're actually the most expensive on the market now. But at that time we were, I didn't know any better. So I just
Right.
went really cheap, which was a mistake. I wouldn't do it
Mm-hmm.
again. But I also know a lot more now. And then it was just targeting the right practitioners. So it was a lot of just like phone calls and conversations and relationships and that kind of thing. And just, I don't know. It's almost embarrassing how bad I was at business. Like I honestly just got super, super lucky like in that
Do
first
you
year.
have
Cause it was
any?
like enough for
Mm-hmm.
me to like not just tank the business. I just had a couple $1,000s. I put that in the inventory and then I sold
Mm-hmm.
those, got more inventory. And there was an engineer that was helping me out with stuff that went to our church. And then like it definitely would have just like curved off there had I not got better at business. But like the first thing that I went to was like, okay, so I'm doing like all these different things. I need to hire an employee and that kind of stuff. But the
Mm-hmm.
core tenet that I really, I guess, gravitated to at the beginning was like deliver value. so in all my conversation, like I didn't really know how to do business very well, but I knew one
Mm-hmm.
thing is if I made enough people like super, super happy and like love to work with me, like that's not going to hurt. Right. So
Right.
that was kind of the core tenet at the beginning. And then the marketing and sales got more sophisticated as we went, but the core tenet was deliver value. And so that was at the time one-on-one conversations with people. Then it got to the point where it's like, I can't possibly talk to all these people. I need to make videos. So I started to make videos that were like based on that tenet of I just need to deliver value to people. And then the videos, I didn't really like doing them, to be honest, especially at the
Yeah.
time. I'm much more comfortable now, but I could barely talk on the camera at the time. So I was
Mm-hmm.
having a hard time with it. So I started to, the articles as well, giving those to people. And those, like, they weren't, it's not like I had a video on there that had 2 million views, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the people that I got to were the right people. So even if I had a video that got 2,000 views on it, it's like if I got 1,500 people that were in my target market, it didn't really
Mm-hmm.
matter if it was like 2 million views because that was enough for me to, sell 100 or 200 of these machines or
Right.
get to somebody who's going to be a referral for me that's going to refer out 100 people a year.
Yeah. It
Um,
was it was always about the conversion rate and not the views itself.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have worded it at that time. It was again, I was just trying to produce things that were helpful to people, and
Mm-hmm.
I think I was, it was good that I was minded that way. Um, but yeah, that's essentially what it was. It was like having a unique offer, which there wasn't a lot of other like options for people in the space that I was in, delivering it to the right people. And then using a channel like the phone or the videos or the emails just happen to work out pretty well.
Oh yeah. Okay.
I know that's
So,
not very sexy or sophisticated, but that's how it worked
yeah. I mean,
like at
I
that time.
mean, so
Email
with
marketing
all,
is the most underrated thing, I would say, for sure.
yeah, I
So
I
like
would
as
say
I
so as
progressed,
well.
email marketing, like that's what like got me from like the 50,000 a year to like
Mm-hmm.
doing over 1 million a year was like
Oh
definitely the
wow.
email marketing.
Okay. Okay. So would you recommend somebody, like, for example, if they're trying to build a brand or build a business, then would you recommend them to focus on email marketing more than actual video content, or what would you say to
It
them?
depends on your business model, honestly. Like, because if you have, let's say you have a low ticket item that would do really well on ads,
Mm-hmm.
just like Facebook ads or something. Well, it's probably better to do Facebook ads than focus on what I did, which was organic inbound email marketing. And I didn't focus on a lot of people, but I just really focused on quality of content and conversion.
Mm-hmm.
But for somebody else, it might be a different scenario. So I think for a lot of businesses, though, it is something that is usually overlooked. So there should be a few things that a business should have in terms of email marketing is like there should be a really good value piece or tripwire on your website. So something that delivers value to the customer or the prospect, and they, in exchange, give you their email. So,
Mm-hmm.
like for us, that was like, hey, you probably don't want to go and read 150 studies. How about I just give you a free guide that like lays everything out for you? Well, that's a pretty valuable thing for the people at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then you have a follow up series that's like continue to deliver value to those people. And you have like 5, 10 emails, whatever, that's just evergreen that goes out to people. And I think that's one of the most under leveraged things that you can do because it's automated. It works really well. It's proven for, a couple decades now to work really well. Like, I think it's massively under leveraged. And there's other things you can add to it now. Like Go High Level is so robust. You can have like different touch points. You can have texting. You can have live calls scheduled. There's so much you can do with it now. And so, yeah, definitely recommend a really, really good organic opt-in series. And then uh, a really, really good welcome series as well, because it's not just about the sale. It's like the whole relationship with the customer that you have in terms of how they interact with you for the rest of their life. So you don't want to just like get the sale and then drop off the face of the earth. You want to
Right.
continue to deliver value because like,
Mm-hmm.
again, if you make enough people happy, they're going to like your brand and your product and they're going to refer other people. And for us, like word of mouth has been more, nobody can turn us off. That's the other cool thing is like,
Mm-hmm.
because we're so organic and word of mouth based, um, Facebook can't like, if they pulled their ads, it wouldn't matter like in the
Right.
grand scheme of things, or like we have all these, or I have like this massive pipeline now of all these relationships and networks and that kind of thing that I can take any product that I want. And if it's a good product and, it's like done with like integrity and all those kinds of things and it lines up with people, like I have a whole network I can push that to now and like immediately have it. Like last year, I for like a couple weeks decided I wanted to try starting a nootropic product because I found this scientist that had this like really unique stuff that I thought like this would be good for the world to like know about, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
decided a few weeks later that I just wasn't going to do it anymore because like it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't worth my time and it was a very saturated industry. But I put up a product page and a website and I sent out one email to my list and it's like a $60,000 a year business off of that one email. Like I haven't had to
Wow.
do hardly anything. Um, and so like it just becomes so like exponential with time. Again, like delivering value, making people happy, having good alignment with other people and like a good tribe that you're around, and um, just helping people out genuinely. Like you create so many relationships and so much goodwill from other people that they like help support you with whatever you do. And that's just like a little side thing that I quit after a couple of weeks. And the
Mm-hmm.
website's still up. It's isoalpha.com, but once it sells out of inventory, I'm not going to do it anymore.
Uh-huh.
Um, but yeah, it's pretty cool what you can do when you just, I think, come to when you put yourself in a genuine heart, like you're actually trying to help the world and not just make money,
Mm-hmm.
um, good things usually happen. Or just not focusing so much on like the metrics and the data. And like you do need to have that, but like don't lose the core of like, for example, a lot of people don't have this concept of like just getting into the right room with the right people with good intentions will go really, really far.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I had this like I'm rambling all over the place. I'm
No,
sorry,
go
but
for
like
it.
I
No.
had this kind of transformational aspect in my career where I was really just focused in on like, so at the beginning I stuck that business. Then I
Mm-hmm.
started to read like a book a week, really got into it, figured out like email marketing, figured out some other marketing methods, figured out like phone sales, figured out like a few different things that helped to dial the business up. And I got really, really hardwired towards like metrics and tracking and data and all that kind of stuff. And that
Mm-hmm.
was really cool. But the thing that ended up happening is I became such a stickler and so rigid about that if there was a room of the like highest leverage individuals possible, I wouldn't have gone at that time because I would have said like, well, prove it to me. Prove with numbers that this is going to end up being valuable. And like just
Right.
kind of an ass.
Right.
And like then I was like, you know what? Like the employees that I had at the time didn't like weren't super happy with me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I wasn't very happy with myself because I felt this inner conflict where I'm like, I have to do this business and I have to make it as good as possible. But I wasn't doing it in the way that was aligned with me of who I truly was, which is like
Mm-hmm.
being genuine, being heartfelt, having like a lot of emotion and passion and creativity. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's like this kind of this misalignment that was happening. And so I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm not going to like do this thing that is making me unhappy. I'm just going to focus on like the relationships and genuinely working with people that I love to work with. And I'm going to focus on, you know, giving even to where it's like painful to other people in the industry. And what ended up happening is like I had this like foundation of like metrics and data and all that kind of stuff. And then it just
Mm-hmm.
like really took off there. To where, like I said, I think so. Last year we did 3.6. This year we'll probably do 5, and then next year we'll probably do like 7 or 8. And then there's other business like surrounding that too. So there's like
Mm-hmm.
other things going on. But that's where it like really started to gain momentum. And so the stuff we're doing now are growing us at a really good pace because it was all like oriented around the right values, which is like being oriented around delivering um, the relationships and the people more than like the data and the numbers and that kind of thing. The data and the numbers should just be like giving you guiding principles, but they shouldn't be like the thing that you're focused on at the core, if that makes
Right.
sense. They should be
Yeah.
like more the peripheral thing that helps to inform like how we're going to go forward.
Right. It shouldn't be the end all be all. Obviously, the end all be all should be the relationships that you're building and the value that you're actually providing. And obviously, I'm guessing that you probably saw a positive correlation between the value that you're providing and the data, like the more value that you provide, the data backs it up, I'm guessing as well. And I'm running out of battery, so let me just plug in my charger real
Yeah, no
quick.
worries. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it did back it up, but I think more importantly, what happened for me was that life got better. Um, and which
Mm,
allowed for more. So it created this like really good cycle of where I feel fulfilled by my job, and therefore I do better
mm-hmm.
at my job, and I feel more fulfilled by my job, and I do better at my job. So it's like fueled this cycle of like
Right.
creativity and growing that's been like massively impactful. And so my relationships at work, all the people I was working with at that time, like I got rid of because like they were founded on this idea of like I just need people that are really good at numbers and data and don't give a shit about relationships. Like
Right.
I don't know where I got so off the rails, but I think it was just because I was reading all these books and I was getting too heady
Mm-hmm.
about it and not really aligning it with who I was as a person. And maybe you
Understood.
are an ass that is really focused on numbers and data, and that is the way you're supposed to do business, but it wasn't for me. And
Right.
so I, all those people I'm not working with anymore, I started to attract really good talent and people who I love to work with. And yeah, it's been phenomenal. Like my personal relationships got better. I've got a bunch of friends in the industry now. Like I can go to a random city like Phoenix or Salt Lake City or LA and spend time with just like a bunch of random people. Like this last time I went to Salt Lake City, had a big dinner with a bunch of people that I just know there, or like go to Phoenix, do the same thing. And I could do that like every night for 10 nights in a row and have 10 different people at the table every time. Like it's really cool in that sense. Like you really start to build a community and start to attract people that are, supportive, a part of your mission, and that you can help out too. So
Nice. Okay. So obviously relationship building is great, and you obviously mentioned you read a couple of books to get into like the data and the business aspect of things. Do you have any recommendations for any people
I got
for
really
what
into
books?
copywriting. So like
Copywriting. Okay.
I got Dan Kennedy. I read everything of his. So he has a bunch. I can't remember the names anymore. But he's kind of gimmicky. So like he's got a style that isn't my style.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but he's a really good copywriter in the sense that his principles still stand. So having 7 calls to action, using bullet points, entering the conversation that's already happening in the mind of the prospect, like some of those principles still apply. So Dan Kennedy, all his stuff. There's a guy named Ray Edwards that has a book called Copy That Sells. That's another good book. How to Win Friends and Influence People is a good book.
I love that
Traction.
book.
Yeah, that's my favorite one. So I mean,
Yeah.
that's the best one by far, right? You can't compete with the best. But
Right.
um, yeah, so Copy That Sells, Dan Kennedy, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Traction by Gino Wickman is the structure that I use to format the businesses, and that's been really helpful for creating organizational structure, especially like the accountability chart. Like the org chart is a super underutilized tool in businesses because what it does is it tells you like not just that these are the people in the business, but these are the roles and the systems that need to exist in the business. So if you're creating
Mm-hmm.
something new, you go and say, okay, so marketing in this way needs to happen based off of like the vision and where we're going and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so there needs to be somebody for this, somebody for this, somebody for this. And maybe I'm not hiring them out now, but I'll hire them out 3 months down the road. So it gives you like a very clear path of like who you need to hire, what the role is going to be, what the systems are, or like when I say systems, I mean like processes, like what are
Right.
the processes that they're going to be doing, all that kind of stuff. So Traction is a really, really good book. I think there's 2 books that people should definitely read if they're just starting with a business. One is E-Myth. Have you read that?
I have not. No.
Okay, that's a really good one. So that's like a conceptual one. That's not
Okay.
like hard tactics. But that
Mm-hmm.
one's really good because it gives you like the concepts of how to build a business. And it's
Mm-hmm.
basically like you build everything like off of systems and processes and it's repeatable. And that's kind of
Understood.
like at a very high level what it is. Also gives you a lot of other good stuff. But
And who is the author for that book?
I can't remember, man.
Okay. But you
I was
said it's
just thinking about
E-Myth,
that.
right? Like
Yeah.
email, like E-Myth?
So it's EMYTH.
Correct. Okay.
Yeah, so the entrepreneurial myth.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you can find it on Amazon. It's a super popular book.
Okay.
The second book that I recommend everybody that's a new entrepreneur to read is Traction, which is actual tactics to implement the concepts of e-myth. So it's giving you the tools and the ideas. And like I sucked at all of that stuff for a long time, and I still have a long ways to grow, but it takes time. So like you just try to implement it, and it's going to get better the more and more you do it, the years that you do it, and all that kind of stuff. But those are two really good books as well. um, let's see what else has been really impactful. The Lean Startup, don't read the whole thing unless you're
Mm-hmm.
like a SaaS business or a software business, but there's one chapter in there called MVP, I think, and
Okay.
it's just minimum viable product. So it's just like people oftentimes go way too in depth with developing their way too much depth with developing their product, rather than just starting with like what is the minimum viable product and then selling it, getting feedback from the customer, and based on the feedback of the customer making adjustments to your product. But what people end up usually doing is they start like just developing a product, and they think of like, oh, what about this, what about that, what about this,
Mm-hmm.
and they end up optimizing the shit out of it. But they're
Mm-hmm.
optimizing it all in the wrong direction. You as a computer guy
Correct.
would understand that, right? Like it's a
Yes.
total waste of time if you build like the wrong stuff for 2 weeks, right?
Right.
And so it's much better just to get started, get feedback, and then keep on pivoting and working in the direction that the customer truly wants.
Mm-hmm.
And like, don't waste all these months or however much time optimizing the thing that shouldn't be optimized, this thing that shouldn't exist. And so MVP, I think, is a really important concept if you're developing any sort of product, whether it's a SaaS or a service or hardware, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Is that something that you implemented in your own business? Like, what would be, I would say, what would be one of the biggest lessons from all the books that you read? What was the biggest lesson that you implemented that had the biggest impact on, whether it be relationship building or data? Uh, yeah.
Yeah, I can't say. I mean, I can't say that like a book has necessarily like it's too hard to grab like one concept that I said
Okay.
would say that this had the
Mm-hmm.
biggest impact. But I think as of the last like 2 years, 3 years, the biggest impact for sure has been just the relationship orientation and like giving relentlessly, like generosity.
Mm-hmm.
And because what it does is it creates a more attractive and better version of yourself. It actually refines your character that other people are then attracted to and just
Mm-hmm.
want to work with you. I mean, I get emails or messages every week of people asking to work for us. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's not very common. Or like the
Right.
last time we sent out an email to our list with like really specific, like you need to be a nurse, you need to have done this therapy, you need to have like this experience, that kind of stuff. We had over 120 applicants
Wow.
with
For
like
just one position, right?
yeah, right.
Uh huh.
And it wasn't like a crazy high pay thing either. It's just because we've generated like this culture of like generosity and helping so many people out that it's really perpetuated itself into something that is like has its own momentum, has its own thing that it's doing, and uh, people are attracted to that. And I know from the outside look, like we are small, so I don't want to make it sound like we're the biggest deal in the world or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like we are a small business, but we've figured out a couple things, and the last few years has definitely been the relational side of it and the generosity side of it for sure.
Okay, for sure. So, two questions for you. So, how long have you been in business? Like, when was the inception date? I would say that you started this yourself, the ozone equipment, and obviously, there's this entire concept of growth, right? So, I'm sure everybody starts off from somewhere when it comes to business, right? So, you start off at zero, and then you go on your first dollar or just one, and then what were the growing pains between like those intervals between like 0 to 1, 1 to 10, and like 10 to 100, and like 100 to 100,000, and then obviously now you're at 5 million. So what were some growing pains, and how long has it been since you started your
Yeah.
business?
So we started in 2014. The hardest part of the business at the beginning is cash. So it's like generating cash to hire people out, I would say. And so
Okay.
like because you need to be careful with your time and delegate and elevate. So there's three things that you should do with like any task, right? You should do it, you should delegate it, or you should delete it. Like
Okay.
those are your only three options. So at the
Hmm.
beginning, all you can do is do because you have no money. And
Right.
so time becomes an issue. So like at this point, like we can make a fairly large mistake and waste a bunch of time, and it's like not going to negatively affect like the business in a huge way, right? But at the beginning, you can't afford that. So you can't really make a ton of mistakes. And because you all have a very limited set of time, you have like 60, 70 hours a week, whatever you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if you stretch it out to 80 or 90, but I don't think most people can maintain that for very long.
How much
Like
how much did you work per week in the very beginning?
Between everything, yeah, probably around 15 hours a day. But that
Oh
was
my
also
god.
like doing nursing school, also
Right.
doing this, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't just this. But yeah, I think time, like, because until you get to like I was talking to a friend, she's a practitioner, and she's in hard part, which is she needs to hire out people that are, 40, $50,000 a year, which is still pretty low pay. That's
Mm-hmm.
not much. But she's only making 120 a year, right? So you're
Mm-hmm.
cutting your pay by like a third or a little bit more than that just to hire this person. But it's a very necessary thing to get to the next level, because as
Right.
long as you're doing like the stuff like you're shipping boxes and you're doing like the stuff that's like $10 an hour work, you're never going to be able
Mm-hmm.
to do the $100 an hour thing more. Like you're always going to be stuck in that.
Correct.
And so getting out of that
Yes.
um, like that 50 to $200,000 a year range is like really important. And so I would say, yeah, don't spend your money. I also did that. I blew all my money right away because I thought like initially I made $32,000 a year, and I would
Okay.
save like $4,000 off of that. Like I was really good with like saving money, and I just thought
Mm-hmm.
that because I was good with saving money, that would automatically apply to 130 or 150 a year. No,
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't the case for me. So like I accidentally blew all that money thinking like it just felt like so much. Like how could I possibly
Right.
use this? It's really not. Even $1 million is not, like, it is a lot.
Right.
But when you're running a business and you're trying to do things, it can very easily go out the door very
Correct.
quickly.
Yeah.
So yeah, just try to find the highest leverage things that you can. Work in the things that are worth $100,000 an hour, whatever it is, and do those as much as possible. And then anything that's underneath 20, $30 an hour, hire out at the beginning.
Okay.
That's really kind of the basis of it. I mean, at a very base function level.
Right. So now with obviously managing 30 employees, like what's your biggest headache? Like or what keeps you up at night regarding your business?
I, I sleep really well. Um,
Yeah.
but I get what you're saying.
I'm sure
Uh,
it's the ozone therapy in the works that helps you
uh,
sleep really well.
Yeah, usually for me, the thing that bothers me is conflict, but that's not with my employees anymore. Like I used to
Okay.
have bad employees. I've gone through enough bad employees. I haven't made a bad hire in a long time. I did, well, I shouldn't say that. I don't feel like I made a bad hire. So there's three things that people need to have. They need to get it, like
Hmm.
they intellectually understand. They just get it. They
Right.
intellectually understand what's going on and they know how to do it. They want it, so they have desire and they have the capacity to do it, which is like a time thing. So if
Correct.
one of those three things are missing, like got to get rid of them, unfortunately.
Hmm.
So this last hire that I had made, I think last November, we let him go recently. So he was on with us for 4 or 5 months or whatever. Um, but he got it. He wanted it. He didn't have capacity to do it because he had another side thing that he was doing that was taking up a good majority of his time. And so
Gotcha.
he kept on being like, "Yeah, I really want to do this. I love you guys. I want to keep on pushing into this." But it's like, man, you're spending 35 hours a week on this other thing, and then you have a couple other things going on as well, and then you're stacking us on top of it. You don't have time to do this, and it is coming
Right.
through in your work, unfortunately. So even though he has a great cultural fit and all that kind of stuff, so but yeah, as far usually it's like some sort of conflict that bothers me the most because I'm just a not very um, I don't like confrontation very much.
Hmm.
So if there's any sort of conflict, I don't mind like I don't know. Usually if there's just something up that alley, I guess. But as far as like what is like our biggest stall to growth. I know you said what keeps me up at night, but I'm going to
Hmm.
transform that into like what's
Okay.
like kind of our next step. Is it really comes down to just like equipping the team with the right people because like
Hmm.
all the baseline is set out, like all the infrastructure has been created, and so now it's like okay, based on this accountability chart, we need somebody that's like highly specialized and innovative in like this area. And so we need to find like the right talent for like this very specific thing that can do that. And so that's like the biggest obstacle for like the next big jump. I would say is just like getting the right talent on board.
Understood. Okay. And so what are I would say so I wanted to ask, so do you value work ethic over like somebody who, like, I know you've mentioned like somebody who just gets it, right? So how much would you say that like talent would outweigh hard work or vice versa? Which one in your perspective as somebody who's hired several employees values more?
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be both. Like, you can't, but yeah, you can't be um, a talented shithead. Like, that never works.
Mhm.
You
Right.
can be a hardworking, just don't got a lot going on upstairs, unfortunately, but work really
Right.
hard and you can
Uh-huh.
get paid pretty well. Like, you
Right.
can. So, like, depending on the role, but every role is different. So, like, some really need people that are leaders and charging forward and creating new concepts and ideas, and they're just talented and they work hard. And then there's
Mhm.
other positions within the company that's like, you're a lovable guy. We love working with you. All you need to do is like get really good at shipping, like, and
Mhm.
you'll make way more money here than you would anywhere else. And like, and we're a small business, so we can afford to like pay people more than like probably what is market average or whatever.
Oh,
But
nice.
yeah, I definitely like in like it's much easier to work with somebody that has work ethic. But if they don't get it, or they don't want it, or they don't have the capacity to do it, it still doesn't work out. So all three of those things have to be there. You can't pit one against the other and say which
Understood.
one do I prefer.
Uh-huh. Okay. And so
But each role is
mhm.
different, right? So like
Right.
some roles require a lot more talent than others. And some
Mhm.
roles, but they also get paid more.
Which roles would you say that require more talent? Like for example, you're a visionary, right? I'm guessing that's something that like it's a talent. Or what's your opinion on it?
Yeah, I guess I'm using talent and skill somewhat interchangeably, but talent to me is like people who just like conceptually are like smart, motivated, and like will get after it. But yeah, I mean, marketing's a big one, right? So like copywriters are paid really, really high if they're super good at what they do. Marketers are
Hmm.
paid really high. Top salesmen are paid really high. Executives are paid really high. So like, the CEO of our business gets good pay because he's an outstanding leader of great integrity and just a good guy all around. Everybody loves him, and he leads people really well. But yeah, it just depends on the role in that. So yeah, marketing and sales usually are going to end up getting paid the most, and then like executives. And then product development is really important in our business. So we have a whole department of product development. So there's like a project manager.
Hmm.
The CEO is also this head of operations. So he's has oversight in the product development as well. That's where he came from in the company. He was actually started just doing assembly and then
Oh,
worked up to that.
nice. So
Yeah,
he worked his way up the ranks.
he did. Yeah, and I was super proud of him. Super happy that that happened because yeah, really thankful for that. Much better than bringing somebody in from the outside at the top. But and it doesn't always work like that. It just happened to. But
Correct.
yeah. So the product developers get paid a lot of money too because they have a highly specialized skills that they can charge $100 an hour for. But that's like if they're really specific into something.
Hmm. Understood. That makes sense. So, as a visionary, where exactly do you see your business headed, or where do you want it to actually head? Obviously, I know you mentioned that you want, your name out there. I mean, not the name itself, but obviously, for ozone therapy a little bit, so people can actually learn about it and benefit from it more. What do you want to see as a visionary of
Yeah,
your company?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I want to see it making a bigger impact, but ultimately, its destiny is just to become the comprehensive stop for ozone therapies. So, like, there's a lot of different disciplines that it's used in. It's used in medical, it's used in dental, used in injections, used in regenerative, used in aesthetics. So, there's like all these different verticals that it can be used for.
Hmm.
So, just comprehensive provision of all those different verticals. Um, and so that requires a lot of product development. It's not an FDA approved therapy. So FDA approval, would like to make a run towards that in the next 5 years. Um,
Nice.
and then, yeah, I think that's kind of like where the company is going. And then there's like the tactics of like, how do you do that? But yeah, it's probably going to stay within ozone therapy is what that company is going to do. And then, there's other stuff that we can work on the periphery. Uh, but two, like it's more important to set up like the system and infrastructure than it is to like just create a business, like, because we didn't just make an ozone therapy business. We made ultimately like a product development distribution business
Mm-hmm.
is what it
Right.
ended up being. Like, and so
Right.
you can take that framework and apply it to other things. And so that's really the value there, is that you can take this model that you built and apply it to any other businesses that align with that.
Understood. Okay. So I obviously so one thing that I want to make sure is that I ask you, like, what is one piece of advice? It could be about life or business or just really anything, any topic that you want to give to people out there that are either, looking to start their own business or are really passionate about something and they just don't know if it's going to work out. What piece of advice would you like to give them?
Two things. First, don't get paralyzed. Paralysis by analysis is what stops most people. So just start doing. Make a little
Hmm.
plan. You don't need to figure out the whole thing. You need to figure out a couple steps, and then just
Okay.
step on those couple steps, and then keep on doing that over and over and over and over. Like, just keep
Uh-huh.
on taking a bite of the elephant. Don't think about the whole thing, because most people just get freaked out by like this big idea, or they don't know how to do it, or I don't have
Hmm.
talent. It's outside of like, just do a couple things in that department and then keep on doing that every week. So have some sort of accountability to yourself where you can reset what you're going to do for the next week. And then you can just keep on taking steps towards it. Doesn't need to be like this big, hairy, audacious goal. Like the end goal can be, but as far
Hmm.
as like what you need to get done today or this week, just make it really small.
Right.
And then the other thing is a little bit more like thinking out into the future. I like to think about like, where do I want to be at when I'm going to die? Like, assuming I live into my 80s or 90s or 70s or whatever, like, what do I want my life to look like on my deathbed? And so there's
Hmm.
5 different categories to look at. There's faith, family, fitness, finance, and friends. So
Okay.
you have your faith, like your spiritual connection. You have your finance, your career orientation, how much money you have, all that kind of stuff. Like, what is, how much are you giving? How much are you investing? How much are you like, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
uh, Fitness actually encompasses overall health. So, what do you want your health to look like as you get older? Friends and family, what do your relationships with your friends and family look like? So, take those 5 different categories and
Hmm.
project out, okay, at the end of my life, I want to have, six pack abs, whatever. Like, I just want to be
Right.
healthy. I want to be able to hike. I want to be able to play with my grandkids, maybe.
Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, I want to be surrounded with loving relationships in my family. Same with friends, and get more specific than this. I'm just kind of running through it.
Correct. Yeah.
And then, financially, I want to have $10 million or whatever, and look at those 5 different categories, and then start to reverse engineer that. So
Hmm.
you take it, the end of life, now set the same thing except for 10 years out, and then again do this process for 3 years out. So say, okay, this is where I want to be at the end of my life. If I
Hmm.
want to get there by 10 years, I got to do this. By 3 years, I got to do this. Then do it for a year. Then do it for 3 months out. Then do it for a week out. Then do it for every day. Like, and then every day you're working towards life end goals. And that's really powerful because it gives you a filtering mechanism. Like, so for example, I said before we jumped on this podcast, it's like
Hmm.
we actually travel quite a bit to different parts of the country. Um, and it's not because I'm traveling for the sake of traveling or to
Hmm.
like be like, oh, look, I'm out traveling. It's because I'm actually investing into friends and family
Right.
and relationships, because those are a part of my
Correct.
end of life goals. And so like I can make um, decisions like that at the expense of other things because it's in alignment with where I'm trying to go. And so that's a pretty powerful tool, I think. It has been for me at least.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that because I think anytime that I actually remember death, all my problems seem really small. So I'm like, all right, cool. Like I can get through this. I can get through really anything, because I know that it's all gonna come to an end. Not in like a very pessimistic way, but in kind of more of like an optimistic way of like, oh yeah, this too shall pass. Like it's not that big of a deal. It might just be a big deal today. Um,
Right. Yeah. It does put things into a different light.
Yeah, yeah. But so obviously we're coming to the end. I love this podcast. I love talking to you. I think I definitely learned a lot. Is there anything that you want to plug in, Micah? Anything to tell the people where they can actually find you on social media or your website, which whatever the case might be.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, so you can go to my Instagram. It's Micah for Health. I mean, that's just more me personally. I mean, obviously, I talked about business and that kind of stuff. There's,
Hmm.
if you want to learn about ozone therapy, that's drsozone.com. That's doctorsozone.com, and that has a lot of educational stuff. And then my Instagram is just Micah for Health, all spelled out. And yeah, that's where you can find me. So I
Nice.
appreciate it, man.
No, thank you so
Sorry,
much,
I
Micah,
rambled a
for.
lot.
No, I loved it. I loved you. Honestly, I don't even call it rambling because this is a show obviously that I try to tell all the people that I have on that this show is basically about you. I want to learn about your story. Obviously, I saw you doing something very cool and something very niche on Instagram, right? So I was obviously I want to mention it to the audience as well. I saw Micah on Instagram Reels and I saw ozone therapy and all of his content behind about ozone therapy itself. So I wanted to make sure that I reach out to him and just try to get him on the podcast and try to learn more about ozone therapy, which has been really helpful because I had no idea that ozone therapy was actually a thing in the first place. And obviously, you had great like scientific and medical expertise, but not only that, you gave me a ton of business lessons as well, which obviously entrepreneurs galore is all about, right? But yeah, Micah, thank you so much for having the time and hopping on this call with me, man. I really hope that you enjoyed it. But yeah, I'll talk to you soon
Yeah,
later on.
thank you. I appreciate it.
All right.